Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Maxwell Construction, who has been our sponsor since the very beginning. For over 30 years, Maxwell has delivered the highest quality projects by holding to their core values of customer satisfaction, positive attitude, respect, and excellence. So if you have any kind of commercial construction need, give Maxwell Construction a call today at 812-537-2200. Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. I am Linda Hutchinson, the Executive Director of Rock Solid Families, and I am here with the number one janitor of Rock Solid Families.
What'd you call me?
Well, you clean the office, you fix it, you're the fix-it guy. Like you're
Wait. I'm not your janitor.
Well, I'm saying you're like the El Generente of Rock Solid Families.
Wait, I'm not the janitor.
Why are you being so offended by that? Like, I'm just saying that's
because
part of what
the way
you do.
you say it, like the janitor, like the toilet cleaner, the scum of the earth.
What's wrong with that? Like, no, you clean the office. You do the hard work. I appreciate that.
I'd rather be referred to as the president. Thank you
want to be
much.
El Presidente.
El Presidente.
Man, your feelings get hurt awful quickly around here.
Well, I just don't want to be known as the toilet scrubber, okay?
Now, wait a second, because honestly, what happens if there is someone listening today who is a janitor or a custodian?
Oh, great.
Are you offending them?
Great. Now, you offended me, and now I'm offending all the janitors out there. Well, this is not going to go well.
This is not going to go well, which is actually perfect, because that's actually what we're talking about today.
Oh, today we're having a little bit of fun, but we are going to talk today a little bit about, you've heard it, the dreaded phrase, cancel culture. Cancel culture and your family, like what that means to us. And so not a totally brand new term, but definitely something in the last year or two has picked up a lot of steam. And we see it actually playing into our family, our relationship, our community, and just ultimately we do see this playing out with our kids.
Yeah,
like
because they're seeing it, they're watching it.
And they're starting to do it.
Yes.
They're canceling. Okay, and so we have seen it come in our office here of late, and so we're going to have a little discussion about that. This is by no means this show. We certainly have no intention of being offensive, and so starting off at the beginning with the janitor thing, You've
just had everybody turn off now.
Yeah, no, turn it back on, guys.
We're not trying to offend.
Yeah, not at all. Because we believe everybody has values and gifts that they bring to the table, and everybody is valuable. And so, but we also think that a lot of times we try to put our influence on how people ought to be or ought not to be, and think that, we should get to set the rules on how we should be.
And the fact that we're not going to get it all right. We are going to misspeak, and we are going to do things that are going to hurt people's feelings. But what do you do with that? And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, we want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions and Maxwell Construction. Both of those are community partners that have come alongside Rock Solid Radio and Rock Solid Families to provide this positive programming that we think is important for our families and for our community. So we want to thank both of our sponsors for their support.
Absolutely do. Yes. Also, I want to talk about a couple different announcements or some things that we are looking at. We get feedback from you guys as listeners and viewers, and we appreciate the feedback. Some of it is very complimentary, and some of it is critical. But that's okay. I mean, that's part of why we're having the conversation here today.
This is part of why we're doing the show.
Right. It's a learning process, and so we appreciate you guys. Obviously, keep the compliments coming, but that helps us, encourages us. But also, if you have, especially like, one of the things that about critical comments is, I said this as a teacher, and we say it as parents. If you're going to be critical, then come with the solution. So come with how you think something should be, or how something should be. Maybe it's a factual thing, and you actually have the answer, and maybe we got the answer wrong. And so come at us with what the solution would be in your eyes to help us, because we all win when we start to understand more.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that later, about how we don't want to just surround ourselves ourselves with people who tell us what we want to hear. And so we want to learn and we want to grow. And so we appreciate your feedback, the good, bad, and ugly, but we appreciate it done in a respectful way. We want to handle that in a respectful way back when people disagree or have different opinions. And we do. We want to have dialogue. This is about healthy families, healthy relationships. And so we know that we don't have all the answers. So in case you were wondering, we're just laying it out now. The disclaimer is we do not have all the answers.
No, not at all.
We don't claim to be.
Starting right here.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, for sure. But we appreciate your feedback. We want you to engage in conversation with us. We just ask that you would do it in a respectful way, and we'll do it in a respectful way back.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but let's get started. Let's talk about just a very serious subject. And so, even though I always try to, be a little lighthearted and joke around, we want to be careful today because we don't want to make light of what the seriousness is of this topic, especially for our kids and family and long term. But the other thing about this is the cancel culture idea has become very political. And so let's make no mistake about it. We are not political in our nature on this show. We do not subscribe to any political parties and not supported by them. So that's not our deal. Our deal is through families. Like what works for families.
And God and his word.
Yes.
That's what we are going to use as our measuring tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another thing, and just kind of setting up this background, is the idea that, people are panicking about cancel culture. Like, oh, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And,
the sky's falling. The sky's falling.
Yeah. And, the truth of the matter is cancel culture has been around as long as there's been people. And, the most famous person ever that ever got canceled was Jesus Christ.
Or they tried to cancel.
Well, in earthly, manly form, they did everything they could
You're right.
to cancel him. And really, why was he being canceled? And he was being canceled because he was saying things that did not go along with the authorities, even though what he speaks is truth.
Right.
And so that's a lot of times where the whole argument of cancel culture comes from, like, well, you're speaking something that's not truthful, so we should shut you down.
And where do you get your truth?
Right. And so here Christ is speaking the ultimate in truth that bears out. We see how, the words of Christ are things that continue to prove that they are what they are and they are right and true. And so, but he was canceled because sometimes what he says is not easy to swallow.
Right. And it was very countercultural. So, that's the thing about this I can't even hardly say it, cancel culture, is that this is becoming the trend. This is becoming what we do. And we're here to say that's not the healthiest way to handle relationships and conflict. And it's not really biblical. So yes, it happened in the Bible, but that's not what Christ came to say. And Christ was pushed back on in so many ways by people, but he didn't treat people with disdain. He didn't treat people with, with nastiness back. He treated them with love, and that we're going to get into that. And how do you handle this cancel culture that we're living in today?
Yeah. A couple things too, Hannah, just again, we're trying to create a little bit of background in terms of how this comes to be. Cancel culture, or the idea of canceling somebody, comes from momentum. Right. And so, like, you could have one person that disagreed with Jesus, or any one of us, one person, and it's like, well, that's just kind of a back and forth. We're just going to go back and have a little dialogue. But when one person turns into 2 and 3 and 4, and then all of a sudden we have a mob sort of thing, we have a huge number, that momentum carries so much more significant power. And so the reason why that's important is understanding momentum is because if you are in the ocean and you're in a wave, the wave itself carries so much power that you may not even agree with what the culture is canceling, but you go along with it because you can't
pulled into it.
You're right. You get sucked into it. And understanding the time that we're in now, how quickly cancel culture flares up due to our instantaneous internet. The web allows us worldwide and literally real time. I can get a mob in one direction. So wave building is extremely fast compared to what it was in Jesus' time.
So because of the social media, because of our website platforms now, this boycott of a person or a group of people, this public shaming of that person or group to establish your opinion or your position is very easy to do today. Where back in the old days where you had to pick up a phone and use this thing, remember this little
Well, I was thinking about the Pony Express.
Even the rotary dial, you know, or you're right, like the newspaper that came to your house, or you're right, the Pony Express where it actually was carried by people, now it's carried by the internet in a matter of instant seconds. And so this is something we're dealing with. And so this cancel culture, I keep wanting to say cancer.
We don't need that. That's a different topic.
But to this incredible reach and this impact, there's this tremendous power and momentum, like you said, to do good things, but then also do bad.
Yeah. So what we're going to talk about today is when we start to notice that something is being canceled or being talked about, we really want to start to study more of the hypersensitivity that comes from it. The idea that, that was said about me, and man, that really should upset me, versus how would I handle that in a more healthy way? Some might even use the phrase thick skin versus thin skin. Am I entitled to be offended every time somebody looks at me wrong? And so the reason why this is important for Rock Solid Families is because we deal with families that have children, have kids, have teenagers especially. Teenagers are very susceptible in this grouping, and they're not taught how to manage what their belief system's going to be. And so as soon as somebody goes against them, they are just freaking out. Okay.
Yeah.
And from that, we have victim mentalities coming out. We, woe is me. And if I don't get what I want, then everybody else should basically cancel whoever's against me. How do I do that? If I can spin up the mob. So this is where we get cliques and gangs and all these kind of things.
Yeah. So we're not teaching our kids, we're not teaching and modeling what it looks like to resolve conflict in a healthy way. Whether it be one-on-one with a person or with a group of people that you disagree with. It also promotes triangulation where maybe you have a person A has a problem with person B, and instead of going to person B with their problem, they go to person C and tell person C to go to person B. Like, we just create this triangle. And that's what we're doing with this victim mentality, and we're getting so hypersensitive, and it condones that mob response, whether it be socially, on the web, or whether it be publicly shaming. We just find someone else to agree with how we feel.
Yeah, very much so. And, again, we said this is not political because this is, we see both sides in the political world really abusing this. And so both of them, if I'm offended, I get everybody on my team to also be offended by that same thing. And so.
And if you're not going to join with them, then you're canceled. You're pushed aside and saying, well, then forget it. If you're not going to agree with me and join the crowd, the mob, then you're part of them. And they're like, no, I'm not part of them, but that doesn't mean I have to agree with everything you say.
Absolutely,
These microaggressions that we're having is so toxic, and honestly, it's so dangerous because it can just create this phenomenon, as we saw, this insurrection on the Capitol, where it's just like it creates this spinning of this mob mentality where we just feel like we have the power.
Yeah, and again, I don't care. It could be Antifa. It could be what you saw at the Capitol. It does. This is not party related. This is humanity and us talking about how we equip ourselves and our kids how to work through this. Okay,
we're not going to solve the political difficulties of our nation.
No, but again, some of it comes down to these basic ideas of what we're going to get through today.
We're talking about our family, what you as a parent, what you as an adult can do to counter this cancel culture that we're seeing today. Instead of complaining about it and keep writing about it and reading about it, let's do something about it.
Yeah. So let's get started on how we can help our kids. And some of this comes into history lessons and different things like that. First off, we have to understand some things should be canceled. All right. There's actually a reason for them. Like, we should cancel certain crimes like, murder and theft and robbery. As a culture, we want that canceled. In other words,
like the Holocaust was not a good thing. I don't care what side of the political aisle you are.
Right.
That to humanity was wrong. But that was that mom mentality even before there was this social media platform where we got everybody to kind of think like Hitler did.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, really interesting psychology experiments on this, on how people go with the flow, even when they know that it's not right, they just will go with the flow. And so there's really interesting research that's done on that. But here's one of the things as parents that we really need to point out, Hun, to our kids. And we do this in our home. We try to do this, but we try to do it at the kid level that they are. We live in a civilized nation, and we pray that we continue to live in a civilized nation. And there are things that should be canceled, but there are ways to go about that.
Yep.
All right. And there are legal channels to do that versus a tribal mentality. And that's some of the conversation that happens when you get mobs, when you get everybody in your corner, when you get that sort of what they would say grassroots or organic.
Yeah.
When you get that going, you have to be really careful with what animal is going to come out of that.
Yeah.
And so we have to teach our kids that there's actually, in this civilized country, there is a process to go through to get things heard and understood and reasoned,
changed.
and then potentially changed and potentially canceled.
Right. Yeah. You know, I want to stop right here because I've been seeing a phenomenon with our kids that's really something I want parents to be aware of. Back in our day, Hun, I was a Christian that lived in a Christian neighborhood, had Christian friends, and I was surrounded by people who are like-minded of me. That's not the case anymore. We, as a Christian, are a minority. And so our students, I just had a student tell me this the other day, like, I feel like I'm swimming upstream alone. Like she feels like she's the only one in her school, on her team, that is a Christian. And she's getting bombarded with all of this negativity, all of this cancel culture kind of attitude about shunning her and shutting her up and shutting her down. And I think, wow, how hard is that for our students? So we've got to be sensitive to that growing up as a Christian today for our kids is not the same it was when I was growing up.
Yeah. So we have to give them the tools.
Yes.
We have to give them the tools, and we don't want them to just immediately fall into victim status.
Yes.
And so, and I kind of think about this a little bit because actually, if you look at cancel culture, one of the phrases that will almost always be used with cancel culture is bullying. It's a different form, another form of
an adult bullying.
Yeah. and at the mass level, the large level. And so, you know, if we break it down into its simplest form, you know, when I worked at the elementary school and I did a ton of character quality education stuff, and we always had many, many lessons on bullying. And
By the way, they had a character award named after you.
Oh,
I just saw a little girl got the Hutch Character Award.
Yes,
That's so cool.
yes,
I love that.
Paige Burton.
Yeah.
I'll call out the Paige. She got the
shout out.
Hutch Character Quality
That's so
Award.
cool.
So we just shout out to her on that. But part of it was just the idea of character as a thing. And the reason why I always jumped on character is the one thing that goes with you for life. Maybe math is going to be checked at the door,
regardless of what
but character always goes with us. And if we don't do it well, we will pay for it. But so part of these steps, like, okay, so let's say somebody offends me. Let's say I'm dealing with a bully at school. I want to teach my kids right away, like, okay, I need to get some perspective on this because right away I'm feeling emotionally vulnerable, like something's going to go bad on me. And so I would walk the kids through a very simple process to help them understand whether we need to seek greater action or we need to maybe even avoid. And so
mom and dad, I would get a piece of paper out and write this down because this is something you can do tonight, talking over the dinner table with your kiddos about maybe a bully in class or a mean kid down the street. How do they handle it when there's conflict? Because we're all going to deal with that every day.
Yeah. Yeah. So the very first step really is, I should say, the very first thing that I want a kid to do when he's experienced what he thinks is somebody saying bad about him, somebody coming back at him or attacking his way or his words, is I want him to ignore it. Yeah, I really do. I want you to ignore it, especially because if it's the first time, you know, people get emotional.
Right. They might be having a bad day.
It's a bad day.
Yeah.
We've seen comedians cancel just for one word that they've said. We have a person here locally who was a broadcaster and had a wonderful career as a broadcaster, and he said something stupid, but all of a sudden to cancel him off of a one-off is really not good.
Well, he
for
admitted
any
it
of
was
us.
stupid.
Yeah. I mean, ownership's important,
Yeah.
And so to own it, but it really doesn't fend well for any of us because all of us will eventually find ourselves
I'm sure
in
we're going
that
to say
realm.
something that
We already have. There's nobody listening right now. Thanks.
No,
you
but,
called me a janitor, and then I said something bad about janitors.
So, I always tell folks, if you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, or halt. So sometimes people are going to say something that hurts your feelings, or maybe they're hungry, maybe you're tired, maybe you're, feeling lonely and no one's playing with you on the playground, whatever, those are the kind of situations where you just got to kind of ignore it and say, okay, I'm going to go to sleep or I'm going to eat lunch and maybe I'll feel better.
Come back again tomorrow and see how it goes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we ignore it. All right. But the second time around, so let's say it keeps coming back at
Pattern.
me. Okay. And a great word, we always are looking for patterns before we're going to get real and intentional about working through something. I need to see the pattern.
Yeah.
So now I see it again. The second time, this is where we have to teach our kids, guys. And this is where we mess up as adults. I'm guilty of this. We have to teach assertiveness.
Yes.
And the assertiveness is not to throw a punch. The assertiveness is we have to be able to speak our mind and to tell them to stop. Hey, that really bothers me when you do that.
Yes.
I would appreciate it if you stopped it.
I've had people who I've called them by one name and they were offended because they didn't like that name. And so it's like, how would I know that if you didn't tell me?
Right.
And so, yes, there's a pattern. I keep calling you by the same name. It has no derogatory meaning behind it. I'm not trying to make you angry. I had no idea. And so if you don't set up a boundary and speak that assertively, like you said, I love that word. Like, this really offends me that I don't know if you realize this. And my gosh, when people do that, I feel so horrible that I did this for so long and had no idea.
Right.
But that's on you to speak it.
Yeah, because before I go any further into try to cancel somebody, I really have to see what their intent is.
Right, their heart.
If I ignore it and it goes away, great, there was no intent. If I tell them to stop, okay, maybe they've done it twice because maybe they're just being a knucklehead or they don't get it. But when I address it and say, hey, I would appreciate it if you stop doing that, and they stop, you really know, hey, this was not of ill intent.
Right.
This was just somebody kind of being a knucklehead and not getting it. And again,
you save a relationship.
yeah, and you save it, and you both learn from it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The third time that we start to get real. So if somebody comes at me again with this same whatever it is, word or accusation,
and you've
or
addressed
whatever,
them,
and you've gone through these steps. Now we start to bring in other parties.
Right.
Okay.
So this is Matthew 18.
Actually, it is. Yeah. And so, that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. The idea that Scripture actually, as Christ's words always does, he brings it back around to help us figure this out. But this is where we kind of involve, and it's more of the sake of not to bring in the adult so that the adult yells at him. So I don't go get the teacher so the teacher yells at the other kid.
Other person
I actually get somebody that is going to be a witness. Okay,
a mediator.
Yes, somebody with a little bit more of authority in terms of to help mediate. And so I would get an adult, I could get a parent, I could get a coach and say, hey, we've been having some problems. And so I would actually do that all the time. I would have kids, they would come in and I'd say, guys, I'm not going to talk. I need you two to figure this out in front of me. So you guys start talking. And I will help work through it.
Right.
But I'm not going to do this because I'm just that neutral party. And so and this is really cool, Mom and Dad, if you're listening, because it still keeps the power, the control in the hands of your kids.
Right.
I mean, this is very empowering for them. All right.
Don't solve their problems for them, please.
Yeah.
Don't go around them. You go work with them because you're not teaching them a skill that's going to be used for life. You're just kind of saving them and you're kicking the can down the road because it's going to happen again.
Right.
And so if you haven't taught them the skills and empowered them to be assertive and that the confidence that they can resolve this, man, you're setting your kids up for failure.
Yeah. So, hey, we've done that. We've gone through. We've gotten a third party witness, maybe another adult or something like that, and we're coming back at it, and it's hitting us again. The same thing is coming up. Guys, this is when we do get very real, and we try to. This is why we have we have legal systems set up for protection. Everything from the police to attorneys to courts and judges. This is when we go to a higher power of protection. Okay, and so like when I was working with the kids, this would be we are going to involve the principal. We may be involving parents and bringing them in. We have policy handbooks. We have these kinds of things that now
it's a last resort, though.
Yes, it is a last resort versus the first time somebody offends me. I go out on the playground and I get all the other kids to make fun of the kid who just offended me, and now I basically have canceled that one kid.
Or I'm seeing this more. A child goes home and complains about something going on at school, and the parent either blasts on Facebook about the school and what they haven't been doing, even though the school has no idea because no one's called the school and talked to them about it, or they get the news involved. That's, let's take the public, mom mentality here, this cancel culture idea of let's shame the school and make them the problem. When really, as a parent, we're not teaching our children how to resolve conflict at all. We're teaching them that cancel culture is the way to do it. And that is so unhealthy. It's so toxic, and it can be downright dangerous for their future.
It's very tribal in the sense that the weaponry have changed. It used to be the biggest gun or the biggest knife or whatever, that tribe would win. But now you offend me, and I involve the news media. I involve, I go out bigger on social media.
I blast.
Right. And so the weaponry has changed, but the mentality is still extremely irresponsible. And it is very much into intimidation rather than actually trying to help the culture get through. Okay.
Right.
And so again, there is a process. We still live in a civilized nation that allows this. We want our kids to know this. We want them to know why it is set up the way it is. Our forefathers had great insight. And so abusing these powers is dangerous. And that's why this cancel culture thing is so dangerous long term for our kids.
And we've done a lot of research on this, and we've been listening to a lot of stuff and different opinions, all sides, of course, But one of the words I heard a lot when I was reading and studying was the word dignity. The dignity culture that we grew up in is that we treat people with dignity, even if we disagree. We respectfully talk about it. We don't go behind their backs. We don't stab them in the back or shame them publicly. We handle things with dignity. And personally, the Matthew 18 principle applied. Now we're in this victimhood culture where everybody's a victim. You offended me, you hurt me, you're the hater, you're the loser, and I win because I've got the biggest, I can be the loudest. I got the biggest crowd. And that's not what we want to live in or teach our kids.
Yeah. So huge point. Hunter, I do think it's worth reading Matthew 18 here, just because, God's word always says it a whole lot better than you and I can. So Matthew 18, 15 through 17, just listen to how Christ spells this out, and you can see where we kind of connect it to that. 15, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. If they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or tax collector. And so ultimately, there's a process here, and Christ gives a process because he doesn't want people doing knee-jerk reactions based off of emotion of one bad day, one bad incident, all right? Underlying so much of this, Hunter, are so many principles of forgiveness. Man, how many times are we supposed to forgive? 7 times?
70.
Yeah, and so it's like, oh man, there's these principles that if we don't understand why God's word is so important, we will get wrapped up into our own human way of looking at things.
Yeah. But on the other side of this, okay, because there might be some critical people listening that really don't agree with us. And I've heard this, that Christians are just drinking the Kool-Aid, that they all just surround themselves with people that want to hear what they want to hear, and that they're not even having any critical thoughts of their own. And I don't want that either. As a matter of fact, 2 Timothy 4:3 tells us that for a time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. That's God and his word. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn away from the truth and turn aside to myths. But you keep your head in all situations and endure hardship and do the work and discharge all the duties of your ministry. Like it's saying, man, don't get sucked into that wave you were talking about.
Yeah.
Don't get surrounded by that mob and just kind of go with the flow. I want you to critically think. I want you to have different voices. That's why we said we want to hear your feedback, good, bad, and ugly. Not saying we're going to agree with it all, but if you respectfully share what you're thinking, we'll respectfully share what we're thinking, and we can kind of come to some understanding of what is the right thing.
Yeah. I'm going to give a shout out to the Megyn Kelly podcast. Megyn Kelly recently tackled a very challenging subject, and that was transgender, gender identity, that whole topic.
Which we're going to talk about that in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and she said, hey, this is a tough one. She has different things that she presents, but then she brought in two opposing points of view, two different doctors, okay? And she purposely did that. And she said, we're going to have a civil
that's kind of a common thing.
And I listened to that whole thing, and they were on different sides of the coin on not everything. I mean, they agreed on a lot of things, but on some critical things, they were on different sides of the coin. But the way they handled each other with respect, and when it was done, like the whole conversation about the sexual identity thing almost became secondary to how well the two got along.
Yeah, treated one another.
Yeah, they were
dignity.
like, and they thanked each other. Like,
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for how we were able to have this conversation. And they both learned some things. They learned how to handle each other. And so, one of the things that leads me to in my thinking is I've really tried to steer, and I want to kind of advocate for this because of how I found myself drifting. Start listening to different points of view on purpose. So if you just listen to Fox News, if you just listen to CNN, how about mix it up?
Yeah.
And not so that you will agree with the other, but so that you will see that the other person is a person, that they have a thought process, that there is some rationale behind what they say.
Right. And also be able to come up with your own decisions. And again, we've said this all the time. Rock Solid Radio is built on the idea that our foundation is rock solid, and that's Jesus Christ, and that's what's unshakable. We don't get it right. When I think about a tree and the fact that a tree is able to grow. Now, you actually were the biologist.
Yeah, so you're bringing up trees. So
exactly.
You're in my wheelhouse.
Actually, I think you took a whole class on trees or something. Or no, was it grass?
I did grass.
Grass and birds.
I did trees. I did birds. I did all kinds of stuff.
So what helps a tree develop a strong root system?
Well, it has to be based, a lot of it is genetic, but also a lot of it is the stresses that are on a tree. So if I take a tree and grow it in the middle of a lot of other trees where it's protected from wind and stuff, it'll actually have a really weak root system. And then, so people do this all the time where all of a sudden they go, I want to build my house right in the middle of that woods. And so they clear out all the trees, but the one big, beautiful one. And then next year the wind blows it down because it wasn't ever feeling all that wind.
So it
before.
needs the wind to blow against it, the stress of fighting that wind.
At a healthy level.
At a healthy level. Obviously, tornadoes aren't going to be good. But the point is that we grow and we strengthen ourselves and our family when we're kind of pushed against, and that's what's going to help us to really clamp down on what do we believe? Why do we believe it? What are we teaching our kids? And so I want that. I want that your faith and your family is strong and healthy because it is withstanding the wind, the pressures, the stresses that's coming against it.
All right. So we are going to close out with our challenge. And our challenge is basically just this whole idea of, you use the word dignity, just this whole idea of teaching your kids to have dignity, but to give dignity as well, to not get caught up in the latest mob or wave that is going on, whether it is for them or against them. I mean, it's really hard when it's against you, and it creates panic and all kinds of crazy emotion. But to just assess your kids and how you're bringing them up. This does not mean like I start teaching my kids that all other faiths are the ones to follow. We teach why we follow ours, but why somebody else might follow what they're following. And it's respect. The coolest thing about this country, it was based in the concept of immigration in a melting pot. And one of our biggest challenges has been it's a melting pot, right?
It is.
But it's also one of the coolest things because it allows us to kind of get in the same neighborhood and go, okay, well, like that's not how we do it, but how do you do it? And we can give and take, and we've been a tremendously strong and successful country because of it.
Yeah, Jesus, when he was rebuked, when he was canceled, he didn't do it back. He didn't shame them publicly. He actually loved them unconditionally. And he's calling us to do the same. But I will tell you, hon, our kids aren't going to know how to do this if they don't understand the love of Heavenly Father. If they don't know Christ and his word themselves, it's really hard to model that toward other people. And so as a parent, as a very young parent, it's time to let your kids be surrounded by the love of Christ, for them to learn and to know who God is and his word and why we love others, especially the Bible says, love your enemies. Like, how do we do that? And it's only going to come through a faith community, a faith foundation, and you modeling that for them.
All right. So we're going to close out. We want to thank our sponsors of Casey's Outdoor Solutions and Maxwell Construction. Guys, thanks for coming alongside of us and supporting us. You know, as we said, we hope that our shows prompt discussion within your family, within your marriage, even in the community. We hope it's discussion for the sake of bettering the areas and the homes that we live in. We would ask that if you listen and you like what you hear or you are engaging in some way, please give us a 5-star rating. Please subscribe to what we're doing and help us continue to get this word out. So, hun?
Yeah. Not that you have to agree with us all the time. We understand that.
But you should. I mean, I'm just joking.
Just joking. All right. So thank you so much for listening to Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Make it a great day. Mr. Janitor.
Oh, that just offends me like no one's business. Actually, I like being a janitor.
I know.
It means
I like
get
it too.
To carry a lot of keys. Say ya.
Bye.
Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. They offer a wide selection of high-quality plants, landscaping materials, and home decor. They do amazing high-quality work and can help you transform your indoor and outdoor living spaces into something beautiful. So stop by Casey's Outdoor Solutions today and let them know you appreciate their support for Rock Solid Radio. Visit Casey's today at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana.